A vision that Coach Walters had, and hopefully this is the first of many. I want to thank all of you. First of all, we know that many of you were asked to be. Everyone was asked to be here, and some of you maybe against your will. We acknowledge that, and we know that the reason that you're here is out of your generosity. Many of you are volunteer coaches. I'd probably say the majority of you are volunteer coaches. And the high school coaches that are here who may get paid a very small figure for the amount of hours that you put in are here just because of your generosity, because you were willing to take a day off of work to be with us. And we certainly want to thank you. And the very reason that we have asked you to come here is not out of punishment. It's not to blow one of your vacation days, but to actually show you what our vision is, that we want to invest in you. We want to give you tools. We want to build up this vision because we believe, and maybe I should speak on my own behalf, I believe that you are of the most important people at our Catholic schools. Now, objectively speaking, I think the principal is the most important person at a Catholic school. He has the vision, he guides that vision. Without that vision, the Catholic school isn't what it's supposed to be. The teachers, maybe subjectively, are the most important people in the school because they are with the students the majority of the time. They're where the rubber hits the road. They're there every day. They have FaceTime with our kids. Some of you are those teachers. But I think you realize that you, as a coach, are maybe the most influential people in our students' lives. Because when they come to see you, they actually want to see you. When they come to see you, they actually want to hear what you have to say. Whether it's because they want more playing time and they need to listen to you, or whether they actually think that you're one of the cool adults in their life. And we know how confusing life is, especially for some of our adolescents. And we need men and women who are in their lives whom they look up to give them a context of how sports fit in their life and how the gospel of Jesus Christ fits into that context as well. That is why we want you to be here. That is why we're so pleased that you were generous enough to allow us to have this conference today. And we want to fill you. We want you to go away from here saying, now I can be a better coach. Now I can fulfill the vision of my church, of the gospel, of Catholic schools, whatever it may be. We want to give you tools to do that. And the reality of that is, like I said in the beginning, I don't think that I had that growing up. I got it from different sources, certainly. But from the beginning, I didn't exactly know what sports was meant to be in my life. And like any young kid, I thought that sports were everything. I thought that my soccer and basketball, that was what I wanted to do all my life, for my whole life. It was the only thing I wanted to do. When my parents wanted me to go to Mass, I didn't want to go to Mass because I wanted to play. I didn't want to show up late for games or for practices or for coaches' talk because I was at Mass in the morning. I was embarrassed to be at Mass. I didn't know about my faith. I didn't know why I was supposed to be there, but I was, because my parents gave me a little bit of context of what sports was meant to be. But like many of our young kids, they don't know what role sports are meant to play in their lives. And I want to speak about this context and the opportunity that we have as coaches and formators of these young ones. Speaking of Bishop Jenke's 1988 national championship team, he was the chaplain under Lou Holtz. And when he was there was a kicker there. His name was Reggie Ho. If anybody likes the ESPN 30 for 30s, you guys know those short programs. I'm going to try to turn that off. The short programs are called 30 for 30. You can YouTube several stories. They're just all inspirational sports stories. There's a man named Reggie Ho. A guy that's 5'2". He was the kicker on this team. He's an excellent story, but I won't go into that. I will go into one thing that he said, one thing that gave him context for the rest of his life. He said, after the 1988 national championship game, Lou Holtz came back into the locker room, and he said this to his men. He said, tonight you won the national championship, but this is not the most important thing in your life. He said, the most important thing in your life is God and your family, and don't ever forget that. That's huge. For a man to hear that, And he realized that he wasn't there to be a professional athlete. He was ending his career that night. This man went on to become a heart doctor. He is today. And that's part of his wonderful story. I was just watching some of the highlights from the ESPY Awards that was just a few weeks ago. Maybe some of you caught that. There's a man there, a professional football player that made a lot of news this year, Devin Still, that plays for the Cincinnati Bengals. As many of you may know, his daughter is currently dying of cancer. I think she's maybe 5 years old. Tragic story. But she's still living at this time. He got up to the microphone when he got a chance to come on stage, and he thanked the Cincinnati Bengals because they allowed him to put God and his family first in his life over football. That's what he said on stage. That's context. People who are in our lives that allow us to see where sports is meant to be, what place it's supposed to hold in our lives. And that doesn't take away anything of the passion that these men have, or perhaps we all have, for the sports that we love. When we get out there on the field, we're there to win. We're there to be relentless competitors, but of course to do so with class, charity, with all of our Christian and gospel values. We're meant to do that. Well, we have to give context. Like I said, when I was growing up, I didn't know what place sports were meant to hold. My vision was on professional athletics. And of course, as Sharon said, when I became an All-American in high school, when I was playing for the United States national team, that was the first time in my mind that I realized that perhaps this dream that I have of playing professional athletics may be a reality. It just might be a reality. If the Lord blesses me with good health, it might become reality. And so even more, my vision was stuck on that. That's who I wanted to be. That's what I wanted to do. And that was the time that my parents, they were the only ones really giving me context. It wasn't any of my coaches. And I remember my dad telling my brother, and my brother's a year older than me, my brother Blaze, we played on every team together. My dad sitting us down, he said, we're going to do this, we're going to be all in with soccer. We're going to travel, we're going to do the whole thing. He says, but the reason we're going to do it is hopefully that you guys can get a good education. Maybe you can help us pay for college. That put context first. He said, this is for education. This isn't for soccer alone. Maybe you guys can get scholarships out of this. I don't care if you go play professionally. Maybe you can get a scholarship out of this. And secondly, he said, never in our travels, never in anything what we do will we ever miss Mass. And we didn't. Ever. To my shame and embarrassment sometimes. To my brother and I's great disappointment most of the time. When people were going out to eat on Saturday nights when we were away at tournaments, the whole team was going out to eat on Saturday night. We were going to Mass because we knew that we had to play in the championship game the next morning on Sunday morning. Sometimes we played on Saturday evenings. Sometimes we had to go to Mass somewhere in Cincinnati. This is before internet, by the way, so don't say you can't do it. Somewhere, looking up in the yellow pages, Catholic churches, trying to make Mass at 7 a.m., coming late while the whole team's warming up. Here comes Blaze and Chase running onto the field. Oh, they must have been at church, you know? Yeah, we were. But giving context, this is most important. This is the most important thing. I had the opportunity, thanks be to God, to play in college. My brother did as well. And college was a place where things got ratcheted up a little bit. Of course, Division I sports are intense in themselves. And it's very clear, no matter what school you go to, that the sport that you're playing in, if they're paying for your schooling, that this is your full-time job. This is what you do. This is now who you are. Education is second. They're not worried whether you go to Mass or go to church or whatever you do. I had a great coach in college. Love him. Love him to this day. A man he was just a great man, a virtuous man. Not a faithful man, but a very virtuous man. But I lost a whole lot of context when I went to college. Because it became my full-time job, because it was the most important thing to me now, because I was putting so many hours in a day, my eating schedule, my sleeping schedule, my study schedule, whatever it was all focused towards soccer. That was what it was all about. And when we lose context of where our sport is meant to be, it's probably because sport has taken a place that it's not meant to be in. And the reality is that when I went on to play professional sports, I realized that losing that context made me lose the innocence of why I really played. And there's so many professional athletes, perhaps we've seen some bad examples of it, that play for all the wrong reasons. And then they end up making terrible mistakes, become public examples of the way their life is spinning out of control because they're trying to live up to some example of an athlete that they were never meant to be. Athletics, which we proclaim as Catholics and as Christians, are meant to glorify God by the gifts that He has given us, that we offer them back to Him on a field of sport, that we can glorify Him, proclaiming how awesome our bodies and our minds and our abilities can be when put together for this fictional game that we've made up, whatever that may be. To glorify Him and then also become holy, sanctified, or at least the lowest level, and what starts all of our holiness is virtue, becoming virtuous athletes. I was able to have some success in college and to go on to play professional soccer. In 2004, I signed my first professional contract in South America, in the country of Chile. It was a dream come true. Truly, I realized that I was going down, and my idol growing up was Michael Jordan. Of course, being right here in Illinois, growing up and watching Michael Jordan through the 6 championships in the 90s, he was everything. He was what I wanted to be. His life was what I wanted my life to look like. That was the most important thing. When I moved thousands of miles across an ocean, down to this long country in South America, everything in my life changed. Everything. And all of a sudden I realized that I was in a country where I didn't speak the language, I didn't know the culture, I didn't have any friends, I left all family behind. I was 22 years old. I moved into my own house, had my own place, unpacked my bags, sat on the couch and realized I am all alone. I bet Michael Jordan's life doesn't look like this. I was ready for the party, I was ready to be popular, I was ready for the fame, I was ready for the money, I was ready for whatever comes along with it, the whole persona of what we think of professional athletics. I was ready for all of that. And it didn't come immediately. It wasn't readily at my fingertips. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I was alone. It was at that time, for the very first time, that I was starting to make my faith my own. This context that my parents had given me when I was young, I greatly respect and looked up to my parents. Still do to this day. I realize that if they live their life in some way, that someday whatever they are living will be important to me. I realize that consciously. Whether I understood it or not, I didn't. But I realized that what they lived would someday be important to me because I look up to them and the way that they lived. And so when I was in South America, to find my comfort, there's only 2 things that I explained. There was only 2 things that did not change in my life when I moved across the world. And one was the game of soccer. It's a universal game. No matter where you go throughout the world, no matter what country you're in, the rules are the same. The game is played the same. You don't even have to speak the same language to be able to get onto the field with all of your teammates. That was my comfort zone. That's what I knew. That's what I fell back on. And so I was there. I would get to practice an hour early just because I had nothing to do at home. I would stay there. We'd practice for 2 hours. I would stay half an hour after practice just to be there. Sure, everybody thought I was working on things. I was this dedicated American, you know, coming down here in a very lackadaisical culture, should we say. But I was there because I was feeling comforted in my life. Secondly, the second thing that didn't change in my life, the only thing that didn't change in my life after moving across the world, was the Catholic Church, the universal church. No matter where you go in the world, no matter where you are, this doesn't change. Even though you don't even understand the words that are going on during the Mass, I knew exactly where we were. I knew the prayers that they were praying. I was praying along in English while they were praying in Spanish. I knew that Jesus was in the Eucharist. I knew that when I received Him, I was receiving body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. I knew that He was in the chapel. I knew He was waiting for me. I felt at home. I knew that's where my family was. I felt united to them in a way that I wouldn't be able to explain theologically. Might be able to do a little bit better opportunity at that today. But it was there. I went back even after training some days. And of course in South America there's a Catholic church on every corner. I would go into churches and I would just sit and pray. I had time. For the first time I started to develop a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Before that, I was practicing out of duty. Before that, if I went to church, it was because it was what I was supposed to do, not because I necessarily wanted to be there and knew exactly what I was doing. For the first time, I was speaking in my own words to Christ. This is what we call prayer. We complicate prayer sometimes so much. It's conversation with God, that's all it is. I was laying my heart on the line. I remember one day going in there just praying for comfort. Lord, bring comfort to my life. Allow me to be Michael Jordan Jr., you know? Allow me to live this life. If I'm here living my dream, it doesn't feel like my dream. Bring comfort to my life. Bring blessings upon my life. I need comfort. And then, right then, in the middle of the Chilean winter, this freezing cold chapel because they don't have heat in their churches. With my coat on, sitting there, I heard in the silence of my heart, be my priest. Shocked me like you wouldn't believe. I didn't even know. I said, well, I don't even know what that means. Did I just hear what I think I heard? I certainly didn't want to be a priest. I wanted nothing to do with the priesthood. It didn't add up to my vision of manhood. It didn't add up to my vision of who I was as a professional athlete. Things were in conflict everywhere. The way that I was living and the man that I wanted to be was in conflict of what God was asking of me and what the church believed that manhood is about. Perhaps that's for a whole nother day. The reality is that I heard the voice of God. The reality is that I had conflict in my life and I needed context in order to be able to figure this out. I think the Lord put this coach in my path just 2 years later. I changed teams. I signed a new contract with a new team. And this coach that was on this team was a man who was a fallen away Catholic and now an evangelical preacher. Wonderful man. Incredible man. I thank God for him this morning as I was thinking about him preparing for this talk, coming in here today. Well, we would have what we called chalk talks, right? You go into the locker room and today, instead of starting practice on time, we're going to spend an hour talking about strategy, tactics, whatever it may be, technique, whatever went on last week, who we're preparing for this week. And I remember at least every 2 weeks, at least twice a month, that during those chalk talks, he would come in and he would present some aspect of the gospel without saying it, without preaching at us. He would bring in aspects of everyday life. He would talk to us about how, because he was an ex-professional athlete as well. He was a great goal scorer in Chile. He would talk to us about the way men are meant to treat women, which is a message that all professional athletes need to hear. He would talk to us about how we spend our money, the impression that we're giving to those who are around us, especially living in a poor culture. He was very cognizant of the way that we spent our money, about what we did on our day off. When he gave us a day off, what are you going to be doing? He would make us think about life. He would talk about professional athletes who are married, spending time with their families, taking care of their wife, being present for their children because we're on the road so much. He would bring all of these gospel values, these virtues. He would bring them out and he would place them in the minds of athletes who nothing else was on their mind except for soccer, soccer, soccer. And he gave context of how this sport can be such a blessing in our life, can provide for so many, especially in that culture. It's the golden ticket to become a professional athlete. Your whole family will be taken care of. Fortunately, pesos don't translate very well to dollars, so it didn't work for me. But he gave context to my life when I was hearing God's voice in my life. This man, not even a Catholic, but talking about gospel, talking about Jesus Christ, talking about how we live our life, the way that sport is meant to be integrated into our life. Then all of a sudden, hearing God's call and answering big questions in my life like, who am I? Why am I here? Why have I been blessed? What is life all about? And what am I meant to do with it? And who is God? Who do I say that he is? And if I'm being asked, then what do I do about that, and how does soccer play into that role? In 2007, we won the national championship with that coach and that very team. I think it has a lot to do with the way that we were living our lives and the discipline that that team showed, and the great talent that there was on that team, no doubt. I remember after all the parties, the parades were done, going back to my house, sitting up in bed one night, not being able to sleep, thinking about everything that had happened in my life in these past 4 years. This was the end of my time there, and now I was living a life that I loved. I didn't want to leave, you know. Everything had changed in my life. I remember sitting in bed one of those nights, not being able to sleep, consciously realizing, having the thought in my mind, this is Michael Jordan status. Michael Jordan won championships. Michael Jordan had parties in Grant Park in Chicago. I remember watching every one of them. I remember the parades. I remember, the hats on, the champagne bottles, the whatever it was. I remember seeing that. And now here it is. I remember consciously thinking, this is probably the happiest that I've been in my entire life. Humanly speaking, it's the happiest that I have been in my life. And at the very same moment, just at that moment, again in my heart, realizing there was something still missing in my heart. I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't complete. I wasn't whole. It made me happy. It didn't bring me peace. And I lacked a whole lot of peace in my life. Even then, I realized at that very moment, perhaps because of all the context that I had received throughout my life in subtle ways, the Lord was speaking through soccer, telling me, this sport will never satisfy you. Your dreams, your hopes, everything that you have planned for your life will never satisfy you. Ever. It didn't, it wouldn't, it couldn't. The only thing that satisfies in our hearts, made by God, in our souls, made by the Almighty Creator, in union with our parents, is God Himself. That is the only thing. If I believe that God is who He says He was, and that He was calling me to do something in my life, that perhaps that might be my key to peace, happiness, and satisfaction in my life, I had to believe Him. That was a moment of truth for me, right there. But it took a whole lot of context. I was finally able to make the decision that I needed to walk away from soccer. That as much as I had lived, as much as I had enjoyed, that it wasn't the end of the line. It wasn't what I was meant to do in this world. It was a great blessing. I'm so appreciative of the game. I love the game still. But it wasn't the end of the road. It wasn't what I was created to do. What you see now, priesthood, this thing that I never wanted for myself, is how I answered God to that call. How I'm meant to find peace. And I have found that peace. And teaching others, our kids, especially our athletes, is one of the most joyful things that I can do. My fellow chaplain at Rock Island Alleman High School, Brother Priest, Father Clement, he said something very interesting, which may be part of the theme, the reason that I based the talk the way that I did. He says that our kids today, and perhaps all of us, even as adults, but specifically speaking about our student athletes, they don't need more information. They need interpretation. We don't need more information. We need someone to interpret information. We live in the information age. Our kids, you, I, as adults, we can get on the internet and we can find anything we want. We don't even need textbooks anymore in our schools. Everything is at our fingertips. We have all the information we want. We can learn how to play a sport without playing a sport. They need someone to interpret for them the information that they're receiving. That is our role. Perhaps of all the people in my life who had given me context to get to this point, the greatest bit of context that I finally received when I started in seminary reading John Paul II. And Daryl, who's going to be here later, was fortunate enough to be called to the Vatican to be one of the representatives of the United States to go and be at the first council of church and sport in our world for the Catholic Church. And he went there with JP2, and that was back in 2005 or 6, I want to say, 2005. And JP2 said something that gave me the best context, I think, that should guide everything that we do. And he said this simple line, he said, sports are the school of moral virtue. That's what sports are meant to be. They're a school of moral virtue. Think about what an athlete does. Think about your athletes. Have you ever thought of them, whether they're trying to learn the jump shot, whether they're coming off a screen, whether they're playing defense, whether they're getting down low in the trenches, whatever it is that you're trying to teach them? Do we realize that our athletes on a daily basis are learning what it is to sacrifice, are learning what teamwork is all about, are learning that there's something greater than them. They're working towards a goal that is much greater than them personally. That the team goals are higher than their own goals. They're learning how to win with charity, how to lose with class. They're learning hard work. All of these virtues on a daily basis, implicitly at least, in every single practice, and when they see your face, that's what they're learning, whether they know it or not. I think the greatest thing that we can do is make those things explicit. Explain to them what they're learning. Explain to them exactly what they're doing and how what they're doing on the field, on the court, in the pool, translates into the way that they walk through that school on a daily basis. Who they are and who they're made to be. That all of those virtues that we talked about, sacrifice, hard work, something greater than yourself, whatever it may be, all of any virtue, courage that you can think of, but those are the exact virtues that it takes to be a good Christian, to be a good Catholic. Those are the things that we can bring alive in them to make explicit in their lives. One thing that I love to ask student athletes, and I ask you to consider today, maybe asking yourself, who are they when they take off their jersey? Everybody at some point in their life is going to take off that jersey for the last time. Whether it's the end of this season or it's the end of 10 seasons from now. When they take off that jersey, who are they? The very fact is, if all we've taught them is how to come off a screen and hit a jump shot, or if we've taught them how to get low on defense, or if we've taught them how to take good penalty kicks, if that's all that we can say about them, then somehow we failed in our mission. Our mission is to make them incredible persons, Catholics and Christians who display these gospel values in their life, who are ready to make a change in the world, who are functioning and the leaders of our society. That's the opportunity that we have. You know, all of our missions in Catholic schools, if we read mission statements, I haven't read them for any or all of your schools. I'm sure they're all different, but they all say basically one thing. And as I thought about some of the ones that I do know and what I think that they should be, basically what they say is, you enter to be transformed, and you exit to transform society. At Our Lady of Grace, which is a school that I'm associated with up in East Moline, every morning the principal shouts out to the kids, enter to learn. And the kids respond, exit to serve. Enter to learn, exit to serve. Come in to be transformed. Go out to transform. They need context. They need us. They need you to be able to give them that context, to know how their sport is transforming them and how the person that they are becoming is going to transform the people whom they encounter. Let's pray for our kids right now. We'll pray for them as we are preparing for Mass. Let's pray that we can become who we're meant to be as coaches, as Christians, to fit in to the mission of our entire lives and the mission of our school, the mission of our church. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, I give you thanks and praise for this opportunity to gather in your name. You have told us that whenever 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, here you are in our midst. Oh Lord, we have gathered in your name, and we ask that you would be glorified by our presence. Please sanctify us, make us holy, that we may be able to transform the lives of the youth in this diocese, and that they may be able to transform your world, which you have created. We ask success and protection upon our programs in this diocese, especially our athletic programs. Bless our schools, bless our diocese, and dear Lord, make us saints. We ask all this in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.